Hey, greetings everyone. It is GleeCon, and back in the house again, bringing you another episode of Lore of Warcraft. Thank you so much for tuning in. On our last episode, we started something that I've sort of been dreading, which was the wrapping up, quote-unquote, of the Thousand Needles quests. It's very long. It's going to stretch Thousand Needles into one of the longest zones. And it presses you. There's such a large gap in what you can do in the beginning and end of the zone that it really stretches the ability. It requires either a carry or pausing the zone, which just really gets my OCD into a knot. My need to complete each zone before moving on. But we started some of the journeys there. We did a couple other things, stretching us out around Booty Bay and ratcheting into Stranglethorn. And we're going to continue those journeys because they have just begun. My guess is at least one more episode in that, and maybe more depending on how we approach it. We've also been reading through War of the Scaleborn, and on the last episode that we read that, chapter 8 of the book, we saw the kind of plan, the machinations of Iridikron coming to the front, where he's taken his sister, who did become an ordered dragon, and is using her as to sow destruction and chaos and just killing Terrasec, which is driving the Terrasec to the primals, and humans, or mortals they call them. I think they're trolls. It's giving the ordered dragons a bad name, such a bad name in fact that Viranoth has now decided to completely separate herself and is no longer friends with Alexstrasza. So stay a while and listen as we continue this mounting tension in this battle in War of the Scaleborn with Chapter 9. For 5 years, Neltharion watched the mortals who had settled in the Waking Shores, first in suspicion, then with keen interest. In that time, the little settlement in the Apex Canopy had grown. New groups migrated to the area, the number of huts along the riverbanks doubled, then tripled. New whelps appeared, riding on their parents' hips and backs in fur slings. These mortals had realized that the dragon flights were mostly benevolent. Alexstrasza and Ysera had sent emissaries forth in experimental versions of Malygos's new visages, ones that allowed the dragons to appear mortal in every way. Their temporary forms matched those of the mortal races that had been victimized in the attacks. But Malygos thought he was close to developing a more permanent form of the visage, one that each individual could fashion and adopt as their own. Still, the idea had already borne fruit. The mortal hunters below had spotted Neltharion lounging on the butt near the obsidian citadel, but they paid the aspect no mind. Outside the Broodlands, mortals fled in terror when a dragon approached their village, ordered or primal. There was little Neltharion could do to assuage that fear, at least not within the century. Mortal generations would pass away before the wounds from Raszageth's storms would heal. Raszageth, Neltharion thought, curling his upper lip. He could prove the Storm Eater was responsible for the attacks on the villages, but the Aspect's petitions to Harrow's Deep went unanswered. To stop her, the flights would need to catch Raszageth in the act, and she had proven herself to be remarkably wily for one so mercurial. Overhead, gray-bellied clouds darkened the day, grumbling in the distance. The mortals pursued a small herd of grazers, creeping through the misty foliage below. Curiously, they now had a wolf hunting alongside them, one that sniffed the ground and led them toward the herd. Is that the, whatever they're called, Banuk or something like that? Perhaps they had trained it to compensate for their poor oral and olfactory abilities. It made Neltharion wonder how such creatures would adapt to hunt dragons. He cocked his head, curiosity piqued. Could mortals be trained to hunt dragons? They certainly proliferated and reached maturity faster than dragons did. Perhaps they could be used to augment the Aspect's forces in the coming war. Neltharion hummed in thought. The world around him faded as the great forge in his mind set to work. Could he build a soldier on a mortal's frame, but with the scales, wings, and magical acumen of dragons? Fuse mortal adaptability with the powers of the 5 flights, perhaps. Thus appointed, such soldiers could serve as both ground and aerial infantry. In a group, they might strike full-grown dragons from the sky. Perhaps they could reach maturity in 20 or 25 years, rather than the hundreds it would take a dragon to grow into their full strength. Iridikron would never expect such a tactic, nor would he have time to adjust his strategies against such a foe. Neltharion narrowed his eyes. It would take years to create, propagate, and train such an army, even for one as talented as he. He might have 60, perhaps 70 years at most. He expected the incarnates to declare war before the century was out. It was an impossible task. There was not enough time. But did he have any other choice? Tyr was gone. The Primal's numbers were swelling, and all the whelplings at the Ruby Life pools would not an army make. Nor would their drakes, for that matter, and the Aspects had precious few other allies to call upon. Neltharion took wing, barely hearing the hunting whistles and the screams of the gazers on the ground below. Before he stepped into Abaris, the laboratory he'd hidden deep within Zaralek Cavern, ideas had already sparked in his mind and caught fire. He commanded his flight to bring him mortals from beyond the Broodlands, alive. Working in secret, he conducted endless experiments on spooling mortal musculature to understand their anatomy, testing the limits of their endurance and augmenting their bodies with various draconic essences. Seasons passed, then years. Trial after trial resulted in a heap of useless flesh or mindless abominations. Adult specimens never woke from augmentation, their physiology twisted. Altered clutches failed to quicken. Mammalian pregnancies ended in stillbirths. The soldier Neltharion envisioned eluded him at every turn. These failures did not deter Neltharion, however. The survival of dragonkind depended on his success and by extension the fate of the entire world. The Earthwarder worked with a single-minded zeal, accompanied only by his brightest and most trusted flight leaders. He could not entrust this task to anyone else, nor call upon the likes of Ysera or Malagos for assistance. Alexstrasza could not learn of what he plotted from the depths of the earth. Not until the time was right. When that day came, the Dragon Queen would thank him for his foresight and his brilliance. The other Aspects would stand in awe of his achievements, and the Broodlands would celebrate him as their finest protector. Despite what the Whispers told him, he was Dragonkind's most distinguished mind. On a quiet, unremarkable afternoon, Neltharion descended into the depths of Abaris, into the Shadow Crucible, smiling as furious roars echoed through the caverns. His flight had recently captured one of the Zakali Jardine's elders, a powerful creature known as Rashok. At first, the Earthwarder only meant to remove the Jardine threat from the field, but now he had other plans for such a robust source of living flame. As Neltharion passed the Elementium forges, Black Draconid snapped to attention and saluted him. Aquamarine light from the incubation tanks bled along the walls, mixing with the crimson light from the magma falls. Sparks swirled through the air, carried on ever-moving currents. The whole place smelled of molten metal and sulfur. As he stepped into his laboratory, Hydra pups scampered out of his way. Red flames danced freely in large braziers, tossing inky shadows across the room. 5 black dragons crowded around a shattered incubation tank, whispering to one another in hushed tones. A foul-smelling liquid from the tank flooded the room. He curled his lip. "What has transpired here?" Neltharion asked, shaking fluids from his right forefoot with a grimace. Several dragons jolted, swinging their heads around in alarm. The most senior flight leader in the room, Livia, turned her sleek head as the others dipped into hasty bows. "Ah, my Aspect," she said. "As always, you have impeccable timing. It seems we have had our first success. Something finally managed to survive." As Neltharion approached, Livia stepped aside. There, at the base of the shattered tank, sat a small, shivering form. The creature hugged its knees to its chest. Gleaming black scales covered its long, lanky limbs. Wet wings clung to its back. The creature had a mortal's physique, but it was not mortal, nor was it a dragon, nor a draconid, nor like any race this world had yet seen. It lifted its wedge-shaped head. 2 intelligent golden eyes locked with Neltharion's. The creature did not flinch or look away, even as the Earthwarder's shadow fell over it. The Black Aspect's grimace turned into something sinuous, devious. It wasn't quite a smile, but he was certainly pleased. "Another failure," a whisper said. "Look how it shudders." A second voice slipped into his ear, saying, "It is futile. You will never achieve the heights you seek." "Your life will end in failure," said a third. Neltharion narrowed his eyes. What did the Whispers know of his future, a thing not even the bronze dragons could divine? The proof of the Earthwarder's brilliance sat at his feet. He would turn these creatures into soldiers who could strike an incarnate from the skies. "How many more survived?" Neltharion asked Livia. 4 others, the flight leader replied crisply, nodding to tanks containing dark silhouettes suspended in liquid. "Though they are not yet awake. Wake them now and bring them to Skarn for testing," Neltharion said. We shall see if this is the soldier I seek. All right, so short chapter, but it was an important one because we see the birth of the dracthyr. All right, we have another episode in the pipe, 5x5. Thank you, as always, everyone. You guys rock. Thanks for tuning in, for listening, for watching, and I'll see you next time on Lore of Warcraft.